get started. Made jokes before about preaching to myself, but I guess I will tonight. Now we got my family here, and Daddy, we playing it safe with some people not feeling well in the church, but I'll try to bring the message like it's a full house. So that's God knew who would be here. He knew who would be listening on the YouTube. So we'll go ahead and get started with the message. I'm going to be in the book of Daniel, chapter 3 tonight. Daniel, chapter 3. I'm going to read the chapter. This is one of those stories that in the Bible that you can paraphrase it and shorten it up some, but if you're going to read it, you got to read it all. If anybody got a problem with that, raise your hand. No, all right. So in Daniel chapter 3, we'll start off with verse 1. So Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold whose height was. Hang on a second. Do I need to put this on? Okay. Give me just a minute. I forgot to put this on. All right, Daniel chapter 3, starting verse 1. Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold whose height was 60 cubits and the breadth thereof 6 cubits. He set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king sent together the princes, the governors, the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image which Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Then the princes, the governors, the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and the rulers of all the rulers of the provinces were gathered together unto the dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up, and they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then an herald cried aloud, to you it is commanded, O people, nations, and languages, that at the time when you hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king hath set up. And whoso falleth not down to and worshipeth shall the same hour be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. Therefore at that time, when all the people heard the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and all kinds of music, all the people, the nations, and the languages fell down and worshipped the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Wherefore at that time certain Chaldeans came near and accused the Jews. They spake and said to the king Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. Thou, O king, hast made a decree that every man that shall hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music, shall fall down and worship the golden image. And whoso falleth not down and worshipeth, that he should be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom thou hast set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not regarded thee, they serve not thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in his rage and fury, commanded to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Then they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar spake and said unto them, Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, do ye not serve my gods, nor worship the golden image which I have set up? Now, if you be ready, that at what time you hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the image which I have made, well. But if you worship not, ye shall be cast the same hour into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And who is that God that shall deliver thee out of my hands? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. If it be our God If it be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Then was Nebuchadnezzar full of fury, and the form of his visage was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Therefore he spake and commanded that they should heat the furnace 7 times more than it was wont to be heated. And he commanded the most mighty men that were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their coats, their hosen, and their hats. Lost the place. So then these men were bound in their coats, their hosen, and their hats, and their other garments, and were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, because the king's commandment was urgent, the furnace exceeding hot, the flame of the fire slew those men that took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down, bound into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Then Nebuchadnezzar, the king, was astonished, and rose up in haste, and spake, and said unto his counselors, Did not we cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? Then they answered and said unto the king, True, O king. He answered and said, Lo, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mouth of the burning fiery furnace, and spake and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, ye servants of the Most High God, come forth and come hither. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth of the midst of the fire, and the princes, governors, and captains, and kings' counselors, being gathered together, saw these men, upon whose bodies the fire had no power, nor was an hair of their head singed, neither were their coats changed, nor the smell of fire had passed on them. Then Nebuchadnezzar spake and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who hath sent his angels and delivered his servants that trusted in him, and have changed the king's word, and yielded their bodies, that they might not serve nor worship any god except their own God. Therefore I make a decree that every people, nation, and language which speak anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made a dunghill, because there is no other God that can deliver after this sort. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. All right, that's a lot of reading, but you got to read that whole story to get the whole story. So these men found themselves in a test. Sometimes we find ourselves in tests and trials. Who in the world wants a test or a trial? I've heard a person or two before. I don't even remember who they were, but I've heard a person or two before say how they look forward to tests and trials because you get closer to God through tests and trials. That sounds real good in Sunday school, but it's not good to lie in Sunday school. It's nobody's looking forward to their next hard time. I don't know of anybody in their right mind that says I can't wait until my next hard time in life. But they do come, don't they? They come. Some situations we find ourselves in because we got ourselves into it. And then some situations we, like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego here. You're minding your own business, serving God. Some lunatic builds a 90-foot statue, wants you to bow down to it. You can't do it. So there you are, you're in a mess. Sometimes you're minding your own business and you find yourself in a mess. Sometimes it's your own fault you find yourself in a mess. But let's look at their situation and see how our attitude should be during uncertain times. And this works for uncertain times that we cause ourselves, and it works for uncertain times because we're being tested or put through a trial. So in verse 12, first thing I see about them in verse 12 of chapter 3 says there were certain Jews this is people talking to the king, telling on Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. You can always count on somebody to tell on you if you try and do the right thing, can't you? But there are certain Jews whom thou hast set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not regarded thee. They serve not thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. So we see here, they're getting told on right here because they didn't bow. They had courage not to bow. Now that herald that cried out said, when you hear the music, when you hear all this music, you will bow down and worship this image, or you're going to get cast into a burning fiery furnace. That was the options: bow or burn. They knew that, and they still stood up. That took courage. Verse number 16, I see that they weren't just courageous, but it's courageous and confident. In verse 16, in verse 15, the king had basically told them, if you don't, this is your second chance at it. It's going to be your last chance. If you don't bow when you hear the music this time, I'm telling you, this time the king's telling them, I'm telling you, you're getting thrown in that furnace if you don't bow this time. And who is the God that's going to deliver you out of my hand? That's the king talking to them. This is the second time that they've been warned. And what they say in verse 16, they kept their courage and they showed confidence. They showed confidence in God. They says Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king. They're talking straight to the king now. They said, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not afraid. We are not careful to answer thee in this matter." Verse 17 says, "If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king." So they showed confidence in God right there. The king said, "Who is this God that's going to deliver you out of my hand?" And I'll tell you who he is. He's my God, and he can deliver me out of this. He can deliver me out of this mess. He can deliver me from you. He can deliver me from the furnace. They showed they had faith that God would deliver them from the king. In verse number 18, I see here that they wasn't just courageous and confident, but they were consistent. And this is getting us kind of where we're going. Is they were consistent. In verse 18, I like this. It says, "But if not," it's talking about God delivering them from the king, that God can deliver them from that king's hand. They said, but then they said, "But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that I will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up." They said, "King, my God can deliver me from you, and I think he will deliver me from you. But if he don't, guess what? Still not bowing down. He's still God, and that don't change anything about what I'm doing. If he delivers me or not, don't change the fact that he's God." So they said, "But if not, I'm serving God anyway." Do we have an attitude when it comes to God of "but if not, he's still God"? They kept going for God when it seemed like God was going to let them burn. It's easy to keep going for God whenever it seems like God's doing everything you want, ain't it? That's easy. But it's harder. It's harder when you don't quite know where he's at in the situation. That makes it harder. That's why we need to have our "but if not." God's going to deliver us. One way or another, we know God will deliver us, but what if it ain't the way you want it to be? But if not. They kept going when it looked like God was going to let them burn. They was courageous and confident and consistent for God. And you know what happened to them? They were courageous. They were consistent. They were confident. You know what happened to them? They got thrown in the fire. They got thrown in the fire anyway. It was doing these people. Now I said before, we get ourselves in some messes. It's our own fault. These guys right here, they did everything about it right. I mean, you know, they started off right, being confident with God. They stayed right, being consistent with God, and they was courageous, confident, and consistent. They still got thrown in the fire. Sometimes you're going to land in the fire. Sometimes it'll be your fault. Sometimes it won't. But they still landed in a fire. And a lot of people would have changed their mind along the way. Now, I think a lot of us, I would hope a lot of us, if we just got told, if it was just a public announcement came out, that's what this was. When a herald cried back in these days, it was a public announcement. I don't know how many thousands of people was there, but if a public announcement just come out and said, all you Christians, you're going to bow to another God, or we're going to kill you. I would hope that a lot of us would stay standing up. I'd hope it said, no, not going to. I think a lot of us probably would on that. Now, what if it was coming straight from the president? That's where the message came from. But now you've already stood up. You stood up when the public announcement said to stand down or to bow down. You stood up. And now they've got you at the White House in front of the president. And like him or not, he's president of the United States now. He's looking at you in your face. And he said, look, you didn't do what I told you to. And now this is the leader of your country talking. If you don't do it this time, I'm going to personally see to it that you are cast in that fire. Now bow. I think it'd lose some of us there. So now it's getting more serious, ain't it? It was all gung-ho when it was the whole country, and we thought, oh boy, I can stand right here in 6 Mile. But now you stand in front of the king, and he says, bow, or I will burn you. They still stood up. They said, nope, not going to do it. And we're not going to do it because God can deliver us. But if he don't, but if not bowing. That would have lost some of us. Now, if you managed to make it that far, I'd say you're pretty dedicated. But imagine what it felt like to these men after they'd ignored what the herald said, they'd ignored what the king said, and pretty well told him to go jump in the lake. But imagine now that the king has told them to heat up that fire 7 times hotter than it ought to be. Imagine you see them building the fire hotter. You see it getting to where the men throwing whatever they was using for fuel can't get quite close enough to chunk it in there anymore, probably, because it's just getting too stinking hot. You see that, you might start thinking something. Now, you imagine when the men said mighty men. These wasn't just some men in the crowd. These are the mighty men that Nebuchadnezzar had. He had them to grab it. Imagine now you've not bowed twice. They've told you you're going to burn. Now you feel these men grab you, and you start going towards the flames. You start feeling the heat. It might be temptation for a lot of us, most of us, to say, whoa, king, I thought I was serious. But that's hot. And I'm backing away. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they didn't do that. When they said, but if not, they meant it. Whenever they said, but if not, they meant, but if not. If God lets us get grabbed up by them men, whatever. If God lets us get thrown in that fire, still, he's still God. But they were sticking with God. They just had a but if not attitude. And let me tell you something else. I hadn't noticed this before, but I think they were in there for a little while. We know that later on here that they were in the fire and walking around and all that. We know they had time to do that. But look at here, and if you look in verse 22, and I won't read them again right now, but if you look in verse 22, you see where the men that threw them in there died. They got slaughtered. They said it slew them. It was so hot that the men that threw them in there, it slew them. So that's how hot it was when they went in. Now, if you come down to verse 26, after Nebuchadnezzar realizes that these men ain't bound anymore, and there's a fourth man in there that looks like the Son of God. And he says, hey, he has a revelation. Hey, I might better let him out of there. You see, the men that threw him in there died because it was too hot to get close to it. Nebuchadnezzar, in verse 26 right there, it says, then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mouth of the burning fiery furnace. So it cooled. They was in there long enough for it to cool down from where it'll kill a man to throw you in there to where the king could walk up to the door and say, you can come out. It was in this fire for a while. Sometimes we get ourselves in a mess and sometimes we mind our own business, but either way, you may land in a fire. You may land in a fiery trial in life. But will you have a but if not attitude? It's easy to say when you're not in a fire. It's easy to say when that man's not grabbing you up and carrying you towards the flame. But when it comes to it, will you have a but if not? He's still God. God keeps me from this mess, he's still God. God don't, he's still God. Will we have a but if not attitude? Will we say, can we say but if not, he's still God? What if we say, can we say if the sickness don't go away, he's still God? Can we say if the finances don't work out, he's still God? Can we say if the marriage trouble's not as easy to work out as I wish it was, he's still God? Can we say if my friends let me down, he's still God? What about if I let me down? Is he still God then? Yes, he is. We got to have that attitude if we're going to serve God. If we're going to truly serve God, then it's got to be a but if not attitude. We got to have. Can we say I know God can, but if he don't, I'm not bound down to the devil or anybody else because he's still God? Can we say that? Can we say but if not, he's still God? Can we say that our devotion to God is not based on what he does for us, but on the fact that he is God? That's what it's got to be. It can't be if he's doing everything I want him to do today. Can't be if he's delivering me fast enough or the way I wanted him to. It's got to be he's God because he's God. If we're going to truly serve God, it's got to be because he's God, not because he might do or might not do. We've got to have a but if not. He's still my God. And I'm still not bound down to anybody or anything else because he's God and nobody else. Now, in conclusion tonight, I want to tell you that read verse 25. Says he answered and said, lo, I see 4 men loose walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt, and the form of the fourth is like the Son of God. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mouth of the burning fiery furnace, and spake and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, ye servants of the Most High God, come forth and come hither. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth of the midst of the fire. And we know from there that they come out, they didn't have a burn on them. It wasn't even smelling like smoke. Now God didn't leave these men in a fire alone, and he won't leave you in a fire alone. You may get in a mess, you may land in a fire. You may even stay a while till it cools down, but God won't leave you there. He won't leave you in there. He's never going to leave you. He's never going to forsake you. And he will walk through the fire with you. He's going to walk through the fire with you. And he'll deliver you just like he did these men. But sometimes deliverance looks different. These men came out of the fire with not a mark. They didn't smell like smoke. They wasn't hurt at all. Deliverance don't always look that way. Sometimes you get yourself in a mess, you get thrown in the fire, and you're going to come out with some scratches, some scars, some things that need to heal, some things that will take a while to heal. The timeline may not be what you wish it was. Sometimes you say, God, get me out of this mess. Now, you don't do it that day. Sometimes the deliverance, the way you end up getting delivered, don't look like the vision that you had in your head when you was asking for deliverance. God delivers you, but not like you wanted him to. So let me tell you something. God has never made a mistake, and he'll never do you wrong. He may deliver you without a scratch, just like he did Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But if not, he's still God. And I'm still not. So his will be done. I'm not bowing to anything else. We can't bow to anything else. There's nothing else worthy to be bowed to. Because he's God. Not based on whether he works on our timeline or how we wanted him to do it, or delivers us in the exact way we wanted him to. None of that is the difference. The difference is that he is God. So we got to have an attitude of, but if not, he's still God. And he will deliver you. And he does know what he's doing. God's never made a mistake. I've had days when I thought that maybe, I don't see how this is not. But then you get through that fire and you look back and you say, he's still perfect. But if not, he's still God. I'm gonna do something now I don't want to do. But it'll make them watch the video, preacher. We got to remember, whenever he's not doing it just like we wanted to, that the but if not, he's still God. And this is kind of the reason why. But I know who I have believed in, and am persuaded that he is able to keep that which I've committed unto him against that day. That's the message for tonight.